everyone. Welcome to today's Pet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and we're happy to join you here today at the Campus for All Animals, the Houston SPCA. So thank you for being with us once again. Please consider coming on down to our adoption center this weekend. We have dogs and cats and puppies and kittens available for adoption, and we want you to be able to find that perfect pet for you. So please come meet all the animals that we have. Now, I do want to introduce you to a very, very special pet of the week. Our pet of the week is Hyde. Hyde is he's a neutered male shepherd mix, and he is so sweet, very, very adorable. You know, loves people, loves to play. He is very food motivated, so this will help if you're interested in doing some training with him. Very treat motivated. He knows how to sit. He knows how to stay. So he is well on his way to being, very talented. So please come on down and visit with Hyde. He will make a wonderful pet. Hyde is a little bit shy, and he would probably thrive best in a home where he can be an only child and he can get all of the attention. So I completely understand that, Hyde. So yes, please come on down and visit Hyde. So thank you guys for joining us. Last week we had a discussion about respiratory diseases in pets. And when we were talking about respiratory diseases, it really got us thinking more about the anatomy of the nose and the different types of noses that there are out there in dogs and cats, and how they differ and what they're used for. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today, about how your pet's nose knows and how, they use their nose on a daily basis. So if you have questions about your pet's nose, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll see if I can help you. So we're just going to get started today, and I will let you guys start. What questions do you have about your pet's nose?
All right. So why is a dog's nose more powerful?
Oh, yes, than humans. So dogs' noses are, in fact, more powerful. And depending on the resources that you read, there are a lot of smell receptors in our nose, receptors that can detect chemicals and scents in the environment. And dogs have between 150 and 300 million of those receptors. So it's about 100,000 times more sensitive than a human being's nose. So extremely sensitive nose. And if you want to know how sensitive that nose is, they are able to detect 1 drop of blood in 20 Olympic-sized pools. So very, very sensitive, and it allows them to do a lot with that nose.
And then are cats' noses as good as dogs, or do they have different amount of receptors?
Great question. They're not quite as sensitive. They don't have as many receptors as dogs, but they're still better than us. So they still do a much better job at picking up scents than we do, just not quite as sensitive as dogs. Cats are also, though, very good at discerning different scents. So they can certainly pick up a variety of scents better than we can as well.
And then you talked about the receptors, so obviously they have more than us. Is there any other way that their noses are different than ours?
Sure. I mean, we all have different shapes of noses as people, and so do dogs as well. So you guys are familiar with dogs that have really long noses. We call that dolichocephalic, where they have very long noses, and we call it brachy means short, brachycephalic, where they have very short noses. And absolutely, so they have very different noses depending on the breed and their genetics. And sometimes the opening to the nose, we call this the nares. The openings to the nose can be different as well. We see oftentimes in dogs that have brachycephalic noses, very short muzzles, that their nares can be stenotic or very tight and small as well. And sometimes that can affect their breathing. So dogs that have longer noses tend to have open nares that allows for better airflow. Dogs that have shorter noses, the brachycephalic breeds, sometimes also have tighter or stenotic nares, which can affect their breathing as well. So yes, they can have very different noses depending on the breed, but they work in the same way in terms of helping to cool or warm air as it passes through. So when we talk about dog noses, one of the purposes of the nose is when they inhale, they can cool the air down as it comes into their body, but it can also warm the air as it comes into their body. It depends on the outside temperature, which is why when it's really, really hot outside, brachycephalic breeds, those dogs with very short noses, are more likely to overheat. Part of that reason is they have short noses and they don't have enough time to cool down the air before it gets to the lungs. So you have very hot air going into the nose.
And how do dogs, communicate with those noses and those smells? How does that work and translate into them basically talking to each other?
Yes, that's exactly right. So dogs, just like people, have unique smells. And one of the things you might notice when dogs are greeting themselves is where they greet each other. And you might notice that one of the first places that they like to greet each other is through the rear end, through the butt. And so, yes, how would you like that if that's how we greet each other? Not very attractive or friendly, but that's how dogs greet each other. And again, it's like checking their messages, right? It's like, greeting each other. And so the reason is right underneath the tail and on either side of the opening to the anus, the anal opening, there are these sacs that we call anal glands. You may have heard of those before if you've ever taken your pet to the veterinarian. There are anal glands. These are glands that sit on either side of the anus that secrete a mucoid substance that has a unique smell for every dog. It smells pretty bad, actually, but it's a unique smell for every dog. And when they greet each other, they like to smell those anal glands. And it can help them tell each other information about which dog is more dominant or submissive. It can help determine whether they've met each other before, a familiarity. It can even help them determine whether a dog is sick or has a particular illness. So they can learn a lot about each other by sniffing the rear end and getting scents from the anal glands. So that's a way that dogs can use their noses, but certainly they use their noses in all kinds of different ways because they're so sensitive. So you might notice even that dogs will not only use it to greet each other and learn about other dogs, but they will use their noses to learn about people too. So dogs are actually more dependent on their scent to identify people than their visual observations. So in a crowd, your dog may be able to find you mainly because of your scent and not because they are able to pick you out with their vision. So those noses are powerful, one of the most powerful senses that the dogs and cats use.
And then how do they use their nose to know where to potty? We know sometimes my dog spends 10 minutes trying to find just the right spot. Is there any signs that we know about that?
Well, sure. They're also wondering where and how they want to leave their message for other dogs that are coming along. They're also looking for the perfect spot. And I really don't know what makes a spot more attractive than the other. They may be looking for a spot that's not in proximity to another, or might be in proximity to another. So I don't know exactly what makes a particular dog want to go in that spot, but they absolutely sniff around for the perfect spot for them. And there's lots that goes into that. Not only the message that they want to leave, but they also want to make sure that they're going potty in an area that is safe when they're using the restroom. It's kind of a vulnerable position that they're in. So they also like to pick a spot that they don't feel vulnerable, because way back when, before dogs were domesticated, when you're going to the restroom, that was an opportunity for dogs to potentially become prey. So they always want to make sure that they're able to see where they're going to the restroom. And so there's lots that goes into picking that spot, but I imagine it's a very big decision that they have to make each day. And so sniffing out the right spot is a big deal.
So then kind of going along with that, is it true that, rubbing our dog's nose and pee doesn't really work for potty training, or it does, or what is it?
No, it really doesn't. So I know sometimes when you're potty training your puppy, you may come home and you may notice that there's an accident in the house. And one of the ways that some people feel like is a way to reprimand their pet is to take their pet and rub their nose in whatever the waste is. And that's absolutely not going to help, because your pet doesn't understand that what they did was wrong. So the first thing, if you want to correct a pet's behavior, the first thing to do is try to really prevent it from happening in the first place. And so if you can prevent it from happening by putting your pet on a good schedule, making sure that they know when is potty time, when is feeding time, when is it time to go outside, where is the appropriate place. Getting them on a schedule and having a habit for them to go to the restroom will help prevent accidents. But then if they have an accident, you really want to correct them in the moment. And that correction should never be negative. It should never be a time where you are hitting them or you are doing something aggressive, like taking their nose and putting it in the waste. You don't want it to be aggressive. You just want it to direct their attention. It could be that if you notice that your pet is starting to sniff around, that might be a clue that they need to go outside and quickly pick him or her up and take them outside to go potty. The other thing is that if you can interrupt that behavior and reward them where they should go, that will hopefully help prevent the accidents. But avoid doing anything negative. Sometimes it can just make it worse. And most of all, it will interrupt the connection that you have with your pet, because now they may develop a fear from you, and we don't want that to occur.
And of course, we want to keep our pets, to be safe and comfortable with us. So when we're meeting new pets, let's say Hyde sometimes is a little bit, nervous at first. Should we, put our hands out for them to smell us?
This is a great question. So, we are so used to this. We were taught this as children, and it makes sense because from a human perspective, whenever we greet people, we always extend our hand because we typically want to shake the hands of the person that we're meeting. And so when we are introducing ourselves to an animal, we typically want to extend our hand so that they can sniff us. We're giving them an opportunity to sniff us, but we don't need to do that. They probably smelled us, a mile away. They smelled us coming before. Their noses are very sensitive. So extending our hand is not really necessary for them. They've already smelled you by the time you're that close. In addition, some dogs may look at that as a threat. So you don't want to, you don't want to extend your hand, as some dogs may not like that. And they may take that opportunity to nip or bite. And so we don't want to have any accidents. And so what you might want to do instead is talk to the owner of the dog and ask if the dog is okay with being pet, if they're used to being pet, if they're okay with strangers. And then you can go ahead and gently pet the dog if they say that it's okay. But really, it's not necessary to extend your hand to let the dog sniff you.
All right, so why would a dog have a runny nose?
Yes, that's a great question. So you should know that a dog's nose is naturally moist because inside the nose there are glands that create mucus that keep the nasal passages moist. We like that. And so the outside of the nose is typically moist. In addition, there is a duct, a little passageway that goes from the corner of the eyes down to the nose. And so sometimes when there is excessive tear production in the eyes, those tears, that fluid will drip down through the duct into the nose. And so we see that very frequently as well. So it's normal to have a wet nose for dogs. Now, if it's becoming excessively runny, sometimes that can be indicative of medical condition. Sometimes it's allergy related. Sometimes it can be because they're developing an upper respiratory infection. So if you're noticing that your pet has an excessively runny nose, you may want to contact your veterinarian, particularly if they are doing other things that are concerning as well, like sneezing, coughing, or if the discharge has a color to it. So clear discharge typically is not a problem, but if you're noticing green, yellow, or thick discharge, or even blood-tinged discharge, please contact your family veterinarian and have that looked at.
And are there any other nose issues that, they could come across?
Well, sure. Dogs are always sniffing around. And so particularly when they're outside and they're sniffing, it's not too uncommon that sometimes they may inhale foreign particles. And sometimes it can be very mild where it just causes a little bit of sneezing and irritation. But in some cases, they may inhale things like grass awns, or pieces of a plant, and it gets lodged in the nose. And in those cases, you may not notice it because they're nose down. And so, they may inhale some of those things. I had a family member once who had a dog that had chronic sneezing, just chronic sneezing and chronic nasal discharge. So what I mean by that is it was going on for weeks where the dog had a lot of nasal discharge, and the dog was treated with antibiotics for a while and it would get better. But then once the antibiotics were done, the sneezing would come back and the discharge would come back. Well, eventually the dog went to see a specialist where they were able to put a camera up the nose and do rhinoscopy. Rhinoscopy is when they can put a little camera up the nose, and they found a blade of grass, and that blade of grass was stuck inside the nose. So they were able to pull that out, and then he lived happily ever after. But that can certainly be something that happens when your dog's sniffing outside. So yes, runny noses can be anything from just mild allergies to maybe even a foreign body in the nose. So if you notice that, please see your veterinarian. They will know the next steps to take.
So then if we see a foreign body, if it's a small grass or it's a small stick, just let the professionals take it out. Or?
Absolutely. Now if it's hanging out, it's hard to tell. You certainly don't want to do more damage. Maybe if you see a blade of grass sticking out and you can grab onto it and pull it out, that might not be too dangerous. But if it's far enough in there that you can't reach it, I probably would not try. Don't try to forcibly restrain your dog and stick a foreign object up there to try to pull it out. You may do more damage than good. I would say contact your veterinarian. Let them give your dog some sedation or anesthesia, and get a good look up there and make sure they can remove that safely.
My dog usually does this reverse sneezing thing. Is that normal?
Yeah, we discussed that last week a little bit too, that can be kind of alarming the first time that you hear your dog do what's called a reverse sneeze. And, it's essentially normal in the sense that most of the time it doesn't require any treatment. A reverse sneeze is usually caused by some sort of irritation, either in the nose or the back of the throat. But what it is it causes the dog to inhale air instead of sneezing. We're used to dogs and cats normally sneezing. It's okay for dogs and cats to sneeze, not abnormal at all for them to, to periodically have a normal sneeze like we're all used to. But what might be unique is the reverse sneeze, and that's when the air sounds like it's getting sucked in like a snort. So instead of then it might be a so they're sucking it in. It's like a snort. So that's a reverse sneeze. And Hyde thinks I'm really silly right now. And that's a reverse sneeze. And again, it can last for a very short period of time, a few seconds to maybe even a few minutes. Typically doesn't require any treatment at all. Unless it's happening frequently enough, contact your veterinarian. They may consider prescribing like an antihistamine or an anti-inflammatory, something to reduce that tickle in the nose that's triggering it.
And then kind of the opposite of that, is a dry nose a sign of illness in dogs?
Oh, that's a great question too. So we talked about kind of runny, moist noses, but what happens if your dog has a dry nose? This could be for lots of reasons too. Sometimes it can just be age. So I see that very commonly in older dogs as they get older, that they will get kind of a dry nose and that it will become cracked and separated, almost granular, like there's little nodules on the end of the nose. That's okay as they get older. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's any sort of illness going on. But sometimes a dry nose, particularly if it happens on the nose and the paws, sometimes it could mean illness. For example, in puppies, there's a respiratory disease that we talked about last week called canine distemper. We said canine distemper was a potentially fatal disease of puppies. Well, one of the clinical signs is actually, we call it hyperkeratosis of the nose. Hyperkeratosis means if there's almost too much keratin and protein build up on the nose and the paw pads, and so it becomes very rough and dry looking and cracked. We see that in some illnesses. There's also an immune-mediated condition that can cause a dry, cracked nose. It can happen around the nose and the eyes and the paw pads. So it could mean an illness in some cases, but not all cases. So if you notice that it's a change, your pet's nose used to be moist, now it's dry and becoming cracked, just see your veterinarian. They will be able to tell you whether it's a normal change for your pet or whether there's a disease process that needs to be treated.
If it was, tested by a vet and it seems to be normal and there's no underlying reason for it, is it safe to use like a nose balm to something to make it a little bit more soft?
Yes, absolutely. Things like aloe, like aloe lotions or coconut oil or olive oil, or you can buy some commercial products like nose butters and paw soothers. You can buy lots of commercial products, or you can use at-home products like coconut oil or aloe to put on the nose and the paws to help keep those calloused areas nice and smooth and shiny again. So yes, you certainly can use things like that.
Someone stated that their dog's nose seems to change to pink. Should they be worried about that? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so if your dog or cat had a pigmented nose, a brown or black nose, and now it's changing to pink, what we call that is hypopigmentation. So the pigment is now decreasing. Sometimes that is an issue and sometimes not. Usually it is not an issue. Usually that's not a big concern. Sometimes it can happen when the seasons change. There may be a little bit of a color change along with the seasons. But again, there are also some autoimmune or immune-mediated diseases that may also cause color changes to the nose. So some of those immune-mediated conditions can also cause hypopigmentation. So again, it may be something that your veterinarian is going to have to work out and determine whether it's something seasonal or whether it's related to a disease process.
And, of course, we talked in the beginning, so many smells that they can detect. Can it sometimes be overwhelming for dogs?
Yeah, it's a really good mental exercise for dogs to sniff. And so when there are lots of smells, and some of those smells could be concerning or could have things that trigger fear in them, certainly it could in some animals stimulate a little bit of anxiety. But again, it can be a very healthy exercise for dogs to get out and go on walks and sniff things in their environment. It can really be a good way to get mental exercise and be just as beneficial to them as physical exercise. But absolutely, sometimes it's one of the things that's overwhelming to dogs, particularly if they have anxiety and they're going to a new place, like to the veterinary hospital, or a dog that maybe is coming to a shelter where there's lots of other animals. Sometimes all the smells can be a little bit overwhelming and can trigger anxiety in some pets. So it just depends a little bit on where they're going, what's happening, and their inherent ability to deal with all of the things that are around them.
And we always wonder when we take our pets to the vet, do they smell fear of, them getting vaccinated?
They can. So one of the things that animals can smell, not only just scents that we smell, but sometimes they smell undetectable odors. So pheromones, hormones that kind of are emitted from the body that signal them, about certain things. They can certainly pick up on the fear of other animals. So there's certainly been research that if there is a group of dogs in an area and one or two of them is fearful, they will emit pheromones that other dogs can pick up on and could potentially become fearful as well. So yes, their noses can pick up on those things. There's even evidence that dogs can pick up on those undetectable odors in people that trigger illness. So there are dogs that are able to be trained to determine whether people are ill as well. So we will give off pheromones when we may have cancer or are about to have a seizure or a panic attack. And oftentimes dogs can pick up on those undetectable odors and pheromones that we release when our bodies are under stress or undergoing disease. And so it's been a really wonderful thing in the last several decades that dogs are being able to be trained to pick up on illnesses in people, because they certainly can detect some of those changes that are occurring in the body.
Their noses are truly remarkable.
Absolutely.
So how can we stimulate our own personal pet's nose at home?
Yes, exactly. So again, if you want to use your pet's nose to the max at home and you want to give them something to do, you can do fun things like get toys that you can put Hyde treats in and let them sniff out the toy. You can put treats and roll them up in towels and put them strategically around the house. Sometimes when I'm leaving for the day, sometimes in the morning, I will hide treats around the house. I am not really tricking my dog. She sees me doing that. She literally watches me go around and put the treats around. And so, she probably already knows where they are, but I think that I'm helping her be able to sniff out treats throughout the house when I'm gone. I'm sure she finds it within 30 seconds, and there goes the fun. But you can hide treats. You can put them in Kongs. You can put them in towels. You can hide them in little places, maybe under the bed if they're able to fit under there, and kind of give them a little scavenger hunt while you're gone as well, to kind of trigger their brain and keep them mentally stimulated while you're out. So it can be fun for them. It can be fun for you. Take them on long walks. Let them sniff. When they're going on long walks, I know sometimes we're all about business and we just want to walk them and get right back inside, but take time to actually smell the roses and let them, get their messages in to the other dogs in the neighborhood. So, yep, it's wonderful that we know how important our dogs' noses are and our cats' noses are. It's a big part of what makes them unique and special in the world. So next time that you're out, let your dog go ahead and smell those roses and take a little bit longer of a walk. Well, I'm glad you were able to join us today on the Pet Podcast. We're happy that you join us every week. Please consider visiting our website, HoustonSPCA.org/donate. You can donate financially, or you can consider ways to join our extended family and donate time through becoming a foster or becoming a volunteer. We're always happy to have you, and the animals need you. So help us do what we do best, which is save more animal lives every day. So thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you soon. Consider coming to our adoption center on this weekend, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll see you soon.